coming in hot like the Phoenix Suns on this Monday, June 19th episode of the Just Basketball Show. I am Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. As always, we have Jake Stevens and Dillon Heiser on production. Jam-packed show today. We're going to talk about the Bradley Beal to Phoenix blockbuster to top the show. Then we have NBA draft guru Ricky O'Donnell from SB Nation coming through. And lastly, it's Dame time, at least time to talk about Dame. So we have Erik Garcia Gundersen from Blazers Banter, his great Substack, to come through and talk about all things Portland. Big show. It is draft week. And again, if you haven't already, subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Hit that subscribe on YouTube. Hit that notification bell. Support the show. And by the way, I want to tell you about our friends at Homage. We have a link below that you click. Some of that money, if you go buy something from Homage, the money comes back to us. They have ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company. They have vintage-inspired designs. They're all awesome. They have NFL, NBA, MLB, WNBA licenses. There's a ton of great stuff there. I guarantee you're going to find something you like at our friends at Homage. I am currently wearing my Damian Lillard, what time is it, Homage tee. It's a great tee. Shouts to the folks at Homage. Go buy something. Again, use our link below to let them know we sent you.
You're jumping in early
Brendon.
on the vintage. You're making the Dame. Yeah. The Dame shirt will be vintage before long. Then a lot of their stuff already is vintage. You're just going ahead with it now, and then it'll just reverse it that way. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. It's right. I was ahead on it. If they make a Miami version, I will be asking them to send that to me as well. Wherever Damian Lillard and Pentenda. Brendon, big news. The biggest NBA news today we have is that Bradley Beal is going to the Phoenix Suns. It had been reported over the weekend before this that it was down to Phoenix and Miami. Here's the trade as far as we understand it. Now, we don't know all the swaps. We don't know the years of the picks yet, I don't believe, and we don't know where Chris Paul is ultimately going to end up. Will this build into a 3-team trade? So that is a holdup here. But as of right now, Beal is going to Phoenix. Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, some second-round picks, and pick swaps are going out. The exact details, again, we do not know, but Beal obviously had to waive his no-trade clause to get him there. It is worth noting that Suns CEO Josh Bartelstein is the son of Bradley Beal's agent, Mark Bartelstein.
You can tell
a lot going on here.
Helps.
I mean, they could be cousins, but just you got to say
it's funny how blatant it is. I was not joking about you saying it. I was joking about just how ridiculous it all is, honestly, more so than anything. I don't know why Bradley Beal ever had a no-trade clause is really the bottom line.
Mark Bartelstein did a great job on that Wizards contract is what I would say, Brendon. So let's just look at it this way. There is a lot to unpack here. We will talk about the Beal stuff, I think, through the context of what else is going on throughout the show. Brendon, here's where my mind went. Beal is another guard to play with Devin Booker, who is also like a 2 guard, as we understand that. He is an offensive first player. He is 30. This is a very all-in move. And my question, I think, to open this up is just, what does Bradley Beal paired with Devin Booker, paired with Kevin Durant? He's the third banana, to be clear. He is the third wheel on that superstar tricycle. What does Beal look like in this offense and with those 2 guys, and what does this mean for how the offense is just going to function with those 3 all on the floor together in the starting and closing 5?
I'm not really sure if it's just happenstance. When you have Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal both wanting to go to your team, you just go ahead and do it. When you have Chris Paul 2 years before any of that, 3 years almost wanting to come to your team, you just go ahead and do it. But for some odd reason, the Suns cannot help themselves but attract players who only want to take mid-range shots. Like, just everybody they acquire is on like the upper echelon of mid-range frequency. Last year, Bradley Beal took 46% of his shots from mid. That was in the 97th percentile of all NBA players. And Booker and Durant are similarly in the top 10%, top 5% in terms of mid-range frequency. So I think that's kind of where you start. Obviously, Chris Paul's not on this team anymore, having gone out in the deal, but that's going to be the interesting part of this. I think my immediate thought is that Bradley Beal, first and foremost, is a guy who will need to get a little more comfortable behind the arc. I think he's going to be the guy. All super teams, all three-headed monster offensive teams. Somebody has to adjust the most. Somebody has to alter their game the most. Maybe you call it, sacrifice. I don't know. You could still produce it at a pretty high level, but I think Beal is going to become much more of a spot-up player, secondary playmaking type of player, maybe bench. If he leads the bench unit, I think that's kind of going to be what his role is here. And he just hasn't had to do that. I mean, even when he played with John Wall, he wasn't really, a spot-up player. They kind of co-managed the offense. And so that's where my mind goes. And I think he can do it. But Beal and Booker both are guys where we know they're great shooters, but they actually don't take a lot of threes. And that's kind of the interesting part of their fit for sure.
And I think the thing with Booker is that just because Chris Paul is going out and you're going to start these two guys, I think it feels like we're going to see point book. That feels like kind of what is going to go on here, Brendon. It feels to me that at least in some capacity, this is now Devin Booker playing point guard. And obviously he's not going to be your traditional kind of point guard, but I think it's going to be on him in a way that is really interesting considering he is a superstar player. To me, you could argue he is the best player on the team. I think at least KD, it's KD and everything, but he's the ascending one. I think at this point, it's fair to say
Offensively,
he's
for
gonna
sure,
yeah he is gonna have to acquiesce some of what makes him special, a little bit to make this work, which is a really interesting place. KD, I think in this construction, he's gonna be malleable to this. I think he's gonna be fine, right? I don't suspect. I just kind of trust KD to morph into whatever. I do think this is going to be something of an adjustment for Booker just because I think he's going to have to kind of be the distributor on this team in some regard. There's just no, he's going to play 35 minutes tonight. Beal is going to got to play he's got to play a ton of minutes and as well. KD's going to be that's going to ramp up in the playoffs. You're not going to have a ton of minutes unless it's the right perfect fit for a kind of a traditional point guard type on this roster.
Well, and they're also not going to be able to get one, is the other part of this, right? I mean, they have Cameron Payne still on this roster. He's the only guy left, really, outside of Ayton and Booker and Durant and Beal. So maybe he's a part of that solution. He's not really what you would necessarily call a traditional point guard, even himself, but maybe that's part of it. Other than that, you're looking at minimums. Can they convince Dennis Schroeder and whatnot? So even if they wanted to, I'm not sure they can. But I think that the reason that they probably feel comfortable with Booker doing that is that he's coming off of a playoff run where he pretty much did it. Even when Chris Paul was healthy in that first round and the first two games of the second round for Phoenix, Devin Booker was basically this team's point guard. And the way that he was able to manipulate defenses in the pick and roll, create opportunities for Ayton, for Durant, for the role players, even for Chris Paul, and the way that Booker's been able to get more efficient over time, I think all made the Suns probably feel comfortable moving forward that way. This is how Booker played early in his career, but it was ugly. They didn't win. They didn't have enough talent around him. So he's done it before. I just think he had to get to this point where he was efficient enough and able to actually make his teammates better enough that it made sense on a championship team, not on a lottery team. And it's a testament to his growth that they're able to be here. But I think you're absolutely right that that's going to be probably their kind of final incarnation when they're closing these games because, again, Payne is there, but a lot of their other incumbent free agents are wings, whether that's Torrey Craig or Josh Okogie or TJ Warren. A lot of these guys that we saw playing on the wing for them in the playoffs, they're probably going to want to retain a lot of those now that they've lost their flexibility. So that lends itself even more, again, to a lineup that is something like Booker, Beal, wing X, Durant, and then Ayton. That's probably what this is going to be, and not a lot of teams play that way anymore. So I don't know really if it's the best decision. It seems like a little bit of a roll of the dice, but it's going to make Booker produce at a much higher level and be thought of in a very different way if he can pull it off.
I'm very curious to see kind of what Frank Vogel and they kept Kevin Young, correct?
Yeah.
like what they kind of design up here to kind of make all of this work. This is going to be a real interesting fit. I'm curious to see what they do with Ayton. I think obviously like the demands of him offensively are going to be, I think, a little bit lessened now. I think I'm curious to see if they do
even more,
try,
even more lessened than they already were when he didn't want to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, and now I wonder, like, how aggressively are they shopping him now to turn him into two or three players?
Would you keep him and have him be a little bit more of an anchor for your defense? And if Vogel can kind of get more out of him on that end, and that's been a lot of the talk with before this Beal deal, is like, okay, maybe Ayton's actually somebody that you want to give a longer look at now that this particular coach is in place. Whereas now, even if you don't get an amazing trade, which Woj and others have said there's not a huge market, if you could even just flip him for 2 depth pieces, maybe that helps your roster feel a little more balanced and not be so reliant, so top heavy on those, big three guys.
I would be more inclined to flip him because I do think they need to find a way to be not so reliant on those top 3 guys. They are going to be over reliant on those top 3 guys. That's the structure of what this roster is now. That's unavoidable. Even if DeAndre Ayton is or is not on the roster, that doesn't impact that to me significantly, right? Like this roster is about those 3 guys now. Their health, their ability to score at an insanely efficient level, whatever that's going to look like, that's going to be what takes Phoenix wherever this is going to go. It is about those 3 guys now. It is about how those 3 coalesce. But if you wanted to build a roster that can sustain itself, and especially if you build in that KD might miss some time, that Beal might miss some time, like whatever it is, I think you're going to need depth just to manage the regular season better. Some of that can come via UDFAs and finding young guys. I think over time, the next couple of years of this, you'll need to nail some second rounders. You'll need to nail UDFAs. You'll need to nail 2-way deals and find guys in your G League. That's going to be really, really important, I think, for Phoenix, especially with this CBA. I would be more inclined, Brendon, though, to flip Ayton if I knew I could get a center back and a wing back at his price range, and if a team would give me a pick. That's kind of the 3 things I would really look for. I don't even need it to be a first. Could it be like a good second? Like you need, like,
I mean,
so you got to replenish the cupboards.
Sure, absolutely. I just sort of think that Ayton, maybe there's a world in which he has a really great season and he's more valuable next year. I kind of doubt that. So to me, it's like you might just have to pull the trigger on the best deal you can find this summer. The deal that a lot of Suns people have been talking about and has been out there is basically something along the lines of Terry Rozier, Cody Martin, the worse of the 2, the more injured at least. We don't really know what Cody Martin is yet because he hasn't played much. And then like the 34th overall pick this year, I think is what Charlotte has. That checks your boxes outside of a center. I think in that case, you're probably looking at, can you convince like a Mason Plumlee to come to your team on a minimum and be your center? Is that good enough, or is it if that's the package?
I just don't know what Terry, like, I like Terry Rozier. What is Terry Rozier adding to your team that you don't have
Probably
already?
Makes a little less sense in the Beal version of this team.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like, maybe they can't be picky. Like, it's possible they just might have to just like take whatever is served to them. Like they're going through the lunch line in middle school on this, right? Like they might just have to take the L. Maybe Indiana wants him after all, maybe figure that out.
TJ McConnell. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, part of it that's interesting, and I think kind of speaks to why the Suns might have done this, is there's just not a lot of teams that really have a Chris Paul point guard anymore, right? The way that the modern NBA functions is maybe it's not somebody exactly with the career and development trajectory that Booker had, where he kind of had his best years when he played off ball, and bringing him back on. Maybe there's a version where, and there's a reality, maybe that doesn't go well, but that's really how teams play. It's your guard is sort of your, Beal's a souped up version of this, but your guard is kind of your floor spacer, your scorer, and just a guy who can, dribble and pass and make basic plays, but nothing, John Stockton, Steve Nash, Chris Paul, Jason Kidd, those guys don't really exist anymore. So I see it from that standpoint. As the Suns looked past Chris Paul, it's like our team's not going to look like this anymore. It just isn't, because there's not another player like that. So how do we pivot? And bringing in another scorer and putting Booker more in that mold and having Beal be able to do a little bit of it probably does make some sense. Plus, Beal's just an awesome shooter. And so you kind of solve your problem there a little bit too, where it's like last year's roster, did they have enough shooting? Could they space the floor for those guys quite well enough? The answer a lot of the time was no, but again, when that third player is Beal instead of a ball-dominant guy like Chris Paul or with some of their other options, well, that's another box that's kind of checked. I think as long as these guys are healthy, they're going to be really good. Do you think this can be an offense that can kind of score with Denver and be among, the really best offensive scoring teams come postseason time?
I think it can. I think particularly if they nail other moves and figure out some of the supplemental shooting and find pieces that fit, it can. Like, I think Booker is that good. Maybe it's just via podcasting with you and getting, and I talking a lot more about basketball. Maybe it is watching just the Suns a ton in the playoffs and in the regular season, whatever it is. I'm a Devin Booker, I'm a Devin Booker true believer. I think that guy is sensational. I think that guy is like an absolute monster and is only going to get better and better and better. It's KD. Like, I think with him, you're going to just, if he's healthy, you're in great shape. And Beal as your third option is a good spot for him. He's not going to be overcast to be in a certain role. I think it is about what you find as far as depth and what you find as far as just supplemental shooting to kind of round this out. I would want to bring back Jock Landale if I was them. I would be trying to keep Torrey Craig. I would be whatever bargain bin vets that want to live in Phoenix and be in that situation. I would be chasing that. The other thing I would look at is, as far as a trade goes, Brendon, to go back to the Suns Pacers thing that I think would fit them offensively. But the question is, like, would Indiana do it? Ayton going out, McConnell and Turner coming back.
Yeah, that's
then and if you did that, Turner can shoot. He can roll for you still as well. You could kind of juice it. You could kind of feed in that win. McConnell will give you really good defense at the point of attack. He's an absolute pest. Mm-hmm. And I think you could do some funky 3-guard stuff with him and Beal and Booker if you wanted to get real frisky. I would like that for them. The question is, like, Indiana is like knows they have you over a barrel, and they'd be like, well, DeAndre Ayton is going to make all this money the next couple of years. Why? Like, you need to give us stuff. What do you have to really give else at this point to kind of get something like this over the line? Even if this is the kind of thing where I would be like, they have like 5 guys I love, and if they keep Craig and Lando at 7 guys, and you could figure some of the other stuff out, like, you make it work.
Yeah.
But that's a hard move to make if you don't have other stuff to also give and then further kind of emphasize what works.
And they literally have nothing. I mean, that's the thing after this trade. They have nothing to trade. Like, we thought they had nothing before this. They have nothing outside of just literally DeAndre Ayton by himself. That is it. And so there isn't. But I think the other part of that is, because obviously that connection has always been there because they signed him to the offer sheet last summer and everything else. But Miles is maybe just better and on a cheaper contract. So it's just a hard sell. I think the way that Turner really broke out and was able to function as more than just a shooter this year probably made the Pacers raise their expectations of what they can be as a team with him, and also just sort of what it would take to move off of him. He's just good. So, they're not as much in a hurry as they might have been when he was trying to fit next to Sabonis and they didn't know what they wanted there. Now they have Halliburton and Turner, and they're going to keep building on top of that, and I just wouldn't be in a rush to knock it. I think that's part of what's hard with Ayton is just not a lot of teams that look at what they are and think we need a $30 million center. That's what's going to get us over the hump. There might be some situations where it makes some sense and it's just like worth it from a, trying something type of perspective, or just like, we're already expensive. We're already in win now mode. Let's just flip some of our stuff for a center. That's the teams the Suns would need to be looking at. Like Dallas has come up and everything else, but I don't know. I really think they may just end up being in a situation where Ayton is still on this team. Their starting 5 is holdovers plus Beal, and then really they're just trying to fill out their bench with minimums. It's an experiment, man. Like, we've never really seen something like this, to have 4 max players on one team and be so all in to win a championship in the next couple of years.
Let's end kind of on one other aspect of this trade, Brendon, and that's Chris Paul. As we look at it now, we do not know if he's going to end up in DC. We do not know if he's going to be rerouted to a contender, is the word being used by some of the newsbreakers. The Clippers kind of emerging as the most likely option. What do you think of Chris Paul going to this version of the Clippers back to the Clippers. Not ending up in DC and maybe getting bought out and getting to pick where he goes, potentially getting rerouted to be the Clippers' answer at point guard.
I like it if a lot of things go right. I think the most likely scenario is some version of not a worst case scenario, but not great. And I'll tell you why. I think one is Russ just played well enough that I don't know why you wouldn't just roll that back, because he seemed to fit from a cultural standpoint and an on-court standpoint, and why mess with a good thing is kind of where my mind goes initially. I understand trying to consolidate your roster a little bit. Maybe there's a version of this trade that actually brings back less money, and Chris Paul actually gives them a slight reduction of their payroll, and that does matter even if you're Steve Ballmer.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, to me, I just think the bigger concern is off the court. I just don't see Chris Paul loving how things seem to operate there. Like, this guy is no nonsense, very much, at least as a worker, like as a leader of a basketball team. His priority is put in the work, go home to his family, win games, be professional, all that stuff. And it seems like, I'm not around the Clippers, but it seems like everything you hear out of there is like, that's not really how things run. It's kind of like, well, this guy wants this today, and we're bringing this guy in for a trade because so-and-so wanted him, and we'll see how that works. And everybody kind of wants more playing time because we have too many guys. And I just don't know if Chris Paul, he's going to have a great chance to win a title because that's a great team, but I just don't know if he's going to walk into that situation and love what his day-to-day is like.
I don't love this for him because I think it just puts him in a really, really weird spot where, it's just another spot where, Chris Paul has, a very hard path to, winning an NBA championship, to actually getting to compete for, the highest level of anything. Or, this is...
aren't they third in the West next year heading into the heading? I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with everything, but they're kind of right there behind Phoenix and Denver, right? Or even maybe next to Phoenix.
But how can you just? I just think we can count on anything the Clippers are. It's just impossible to say that that's going to work out. It just doesn't usually go that way with them. It hasn't. The Kawhi is in and out. And Paul George has been hurt a lot. I don't know how you can expect that team to just add Chris Paul and for it to just kind of work how would be an optimal way for him to contend. I get why they're doing it. I think if they're where they're at, why not go all in on that kind of guy? But it's also another guy that could get hurt. It's not inconceivable to me that if you're the Clippers, you get to the playoffs next year. Let's say you're the 4 seed. Kawhi's played most of your something. Gets hurt again in the playoffs. Chris Paul always gets hurt around that time of year. It's just a tough place for him to end up, where I think he would have a lot of responsibilities. And I think he can provide that, but it's about how often he can do it and how healthy he's going to be. That's a really tricky place for me to be.
Yeah, I think they can keep him healthy. That's one of the things. They're a really deep team. They have other guards. If maybe they still bring back Russ, I don't know. And his family lives in LA, and so I think that was important to him. And when you think about it from that perspective and just sort of the uncertainty across the whole entire Eastern Conference, where was he really going to go that he would have felt like he's not going to the Nuggets? He just left the Suns. There's only so many places that are going to present you a great shot at winning a championship. Miami, okay, sure, but they're kind of pursuing their own business. The Bucks, I don't really think anyone would choose to live in Milwaukee if all things else are even, and be away from your family. And you're getting down the line. Boston, it already came out right away. He didn't want to go to Boston, which is a thing that a lot of NBA players love to tell us. So it's
mm-hmm.
I mean, where were you going to go? I guess it's just sort of even if it's the 5th best option, but it's home, it is what it is. I agree. I don't think it's a lock, but he's had a lot of chances to win a title. And so if it happens, it happens.
And he gets all his money this way, which is good for him.
Yeah, he got 10 more million guaranteed with this. And then if the trade happened, it would be fully guaranteed. But even if he gets cut ultimately and ends up with the Lakers or something, he got 10 more million out of this. So I'm sure he wasn't super bummed, all things considered.
A lot more to come on the Suns front as we evolve. We're starting to see some of the information come in about picks, and the Suns are. Brendon, you won't be covering NBA draft stuff for a long time, is what I'm gathering.
Yeah, Bronny James is in the conference that my two universities in this state belong to, so I had a little bit of optimism about, hey, maybe I dip back in, but it will definitely not be from a Sun standpoint.
No, but all right, coming up next, we're going to talk about the NBA draft with Ricky O'Donnell. All right, we move on from Bradley Beal. We have Ricky O'Donnell, two-time Just Basketball show guest Ricky O'Donnell from SB Nation. First repeat guest. Ricky, I will send you the plaques in the mail, but I want to start with a very big question in this draft. How do I put this? There has been some not so soft selling via like the telecast we see with Woj talking about this and stuff, that Victor Wembanyama is the greatest team sports prospect of all time, or is this like once in a generational, never before seen thing, and it's like the hype around him is crazy. Where does he actually rank among? Let's just do NBA, regardless of is he a better prospect than Messi at age 18? Is a question I don't really think we can answer. But what is he as a prospect among guys this century, like of the last 20 years? Where does he actually rank? Where does he actually stack up?
Yeah, I mean, I've been covering the draft for over 10 years, and I think he's the most tantalizing prospect I've seen. If you would have asked me that question before this year, I probably would have said Zion. And how is that working out right now? Not super great. Luka, of course, up there too. Plenty more that I was wrong about. Markelle Fultz. The list goes on. Anthony Davis mentioned in there. I'm just thinking about it a little bit harder now. Over the last 20 years, we're saying
LeBron.
Li
Jing, I can't pronounce his name, but the guy that worked out against a chair.
He schooled that chair. He went number 6, maybe?
Yeah.
Back in the day?
Yeah.
I mean, I think Wemby lives up to the hype. I think Wemby's incredible. Just the fact that he's already going to be the tallest player in the NBA as soon as he gets drafted before he plays a game. He's really fluid athletically for a guy that size. The reason there's no 7'5" guys in the NBA is because all the 7'5" guys move like Taco Fall and Zach Edey. And Wemby does not move like those guys. He's really fluid for someone that size. Just an 8-foot wingspan is ridiculous. And there was a play going around Twitter from the championship series in France where he was basically able to tag the roller, then still recover to a wing shooter, which he deflected the ball, got a run out, steal, dunk out of it. Like nobody else is making that play to be able to recover from like tagging the roller deep in the paint to still getting out to the 3-point shooter. So just off tools alone, Wemby would be one of the best prospects ever. I think if you just looked at it like, okay, the guy is athletically pretty fluid. He's insanely fluid for 7'5". He has an 8-foot wingspan. He should be an all-time great play finisher on both ends of the floor. That's just like the tools, but then you look at what he actually did on the floor this year, and like he lifted his team to success when I don't think most people coming into the year thought like, okay, Mets 92 is going to be a really solid team built around a 19-year-old, and really just like that whole team was set up to like see what Wembanyama could do in terms of stretching out his skill set. It's not like they were competing in EuroLeague. They weren't like trying to win games. The prioritization was his development. And even with that, he was still able to lead them to unbelievable team success. I think he was like second in the league in scoring, first in the league in blocks, first in rebounds. Shooting percentages from deep, not always great, but I think he shot the ball really well from the free throw line. And then you just see the flashes of skill, the 1-foot, runners from 3. I have a story coming out on SB Nation later this week, just like ranking his best plays, like the 40 best Wembanyama plays, and they're all just totally ridiculous. So if you ask me, I think he's the best prospect since LeBron, absolutely. And I don't think it's that bold of a claim just because he's 7'5". He has an 8-foot wingspan. He can move and he can shoot and he can pass and he plays hard. That does not mean at all that he's going to be the best player since LeBron. There's so many factors that could prevent him from reaching his potential. But I do think the Spurs are a great landing spot for him. And I think if the guy stays healthy, he should be a all-time great basketball player. We'll see if he can live up to it. No pressure, kid. But Yeah, I don't think it's too bold to say that coming into this draft.
So your point about the team success and kind of what the team evolved into being is one that lands for me, because I watched I think games 1 and 2 of the finals, and I watched a couple games here and there throughout the playoffs, and teams were really gearing up against him in a way that I think surprised me, because I knew what you're talking about. I think I had this impression of like, this team is sort of just letting him try stuff. But to see him in actual basketball situations where he's getting doubled in the post and has to just sort of make a quick read, or he is, having to read a team's offense and, actually play defense. I guess I just had this impression that it was a little more high schoolish, or a little, like I had some of that in mind, G League Ignite, whatever, that a little bit less structured, because I knew that the team was there for his growth. But to see him doing stuff in real sort of competitive basketball situations, I actually think I read it the wrong way. And hearing you talk through it, I'm sold, because I was sort of reading that as like, he's not doing the wow stuff as consistently as I expected. And it was the playoffs, and it was a different situation, and I'm sure your 40 plays could convince me in a completely other direction, and they probably will. But that's where I started to get some reservations a little bit. But I think you're totally right to point out that being able to do that, there is something pretty huge and significant to be said, considering how young he is and how raw he is, that he was able to do those things with the amount of testing that the opponents were throwing at him as the playoffs went along, and to continue to win, continue to make winning plays. That's what made me drawn to Luka in the first place. So I feel a little silly. I appreciate you making me feel silly. I was also watching I watched the game, I think it was game 1 of the 1971 finals this week. I don't know why. They're all on the NBA app, and I was eating like lunch and just like, let's try some stuff. And there is something about it too that I think connects people of, the Kareem comparison, just because of their size and fluidity, is been said before. Again, good luck, young fella. Enjoy that comparison. One of the best players of all time. But there is something so rudimentary about the way Kareem dominated that I think actually does extend to Wembanyama. And it sort of, you have to kind of step back and remind yourself, like, this dude, it's not normal to be able to do that at his size. And the fact that he can, and that it looks so effortless, is a testament to him, not a knock on him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just like in general, the way people talk about Wembanyama in like such hushed tones, already so much pressure being put on him, like the smart bet is to fade him. Like, I mean, is he going to be as good as Jokic historically? Like, almost certainly not, right? Because Jokic is one of the greatest centers of all time. But it sort of feels like if he's not as good as Jokic, it's going to be a disappointment. And that's stupid. That just doesn't really make any sense. And there's just so much that could go wrong for him that, if you're saying, okay, is he going to be one of the 20 best players of all time? And then the other hand is be a bust. Like, it's going to be just hard for him to live up to the hype, just because the hype is so ridiculous. But I've written that same Kareem comparison myself when doing a deep dive into him. Maybe like I published a big story on him a year ago at the draft. Just sort of saying this guy's the next big thing, who's going to be the prize of next year's draft. He missed the previous draft by 4 days, because I believe he's born January 4th. So, if he was born a week earlier, he would have gone to the Magic instead of Paolo Banchero. But it just seems written in the stars for him to go to the Spurs, right? Not saying they rigged the lottery, but it just seemed a little too perfect in that. I think he was very excited to go to San Antonio. I think you have a nice completionist story here with Greg Popovich, probably coaching his first few years and hanging it up. But in general, like, there's no reason really to be super skeptical of Wembanyama. I do think he's going to have growing pains. One thing that just like watching his games, I've noticed he wants to take a lot of mid-range shots. And I wonder, like, that's going to be frustrating to watch, because it's like, dude, you should live at the rim. Like, just get him a veteran point guard. I don't know if it's Trey Jones or if it's someone else, and just throw the lob and just let him dunk it. He should be living at the rim. But I think he's going to want to take like Kevin Durant style shots. And when those shots go in, it's going to look amazing. But is he going to be able to hit them efficiently enough where it's consistently good offense? I don't know. And even if he's putting up like, all-star caliber numbers, like before this show started, we were chatting about the numbers Porzingis was putting up. It just feels like in today's NBA, if the team is built around you, like the offensive efficiencies are so high around the league that somebody has to amass those numbers. So I think like he's going to put up big numbers early in his career. There may be an all-star discussion. I've heard that from, I think maybe Giavoni's been saying that lately, that he's going to be an all-star in his first year. And you can sort of see the pathway to that happening just because, I mean, someone on San Antonio has to score. And if he's, durable enough and available enough, he's going to put up some big stats, I think. But I don't know, like he's got so much pressure on his shoulders. I think he's awesome, but just because he's one of the best prospects ever does not mean he's going to be one of the best players ever.
Chris, I'm curious what you think of him, or your thoughts, but I think the best way to put my thing is not even so much that I'm fading him or thinking he's going to be a bust. I think it's just maybe what a lot of fans who might be dipping into his playoffs this past month, or who will be watching him in October or at Summer League, apparently he might play, is just coming to somebody so late when the hype is already there. And I think that's what I was experiencing, where you're almost comparing them to that instead of just absorbing their game. And I think that's a lot of what was going on. And yeah, some of the frustration over the shot selection, I think is there too. But he's going to be a blast, and I think the impact he can make defensively is going to be immediate. What do you think?
And I do think the Spurs part of this is worth hitting on, just because I think if there's a place that I would feel would give him, at least historically before we know that franchise, like who, it's changed. It's not the same as it was. Like this isn't like just a recreation of Duncan. That's not how this ever works. These things aren't ever 1-to-1. But if there's an organization that would feel like it is built to help cater Victor Wembanyama to be able to live up to these expectations, like you would think it's the Spurs, right? Like that to me is like one of the things I like about this, because he has Pop there to shepherd him. They are going to have a front office that has done some of this before. That there's already some good players there. Like I'm a Keldon Johnson fan. Like they did Brandon in the first round last year. Like they had they like Zach Collins is like an interesting like guy to play with in the front court as he starts to just like there isn't. Like this isn't like he ended up in Charlotte where it's like I just don't know what you're getting into there. We kind of know what he's getting into here. And he's going to need this, like, LeBron, I would be curious to see what LeBron would have to say about this, if we got him candidly about this, because that is the only guy that has come in, maybe Zion too, at least got close to that, the hype at least, but LeBron came in with this pressure to save a franchise, to live up to being Michael Jordan, to being the chosen one and having that tattooed on him and being on the SI cover. This is the 2023 version of that, where they're putting his games on the NBA app and they're alerting you when Victor Wembanyama is playing, and like they flew Windy to France to do like a 2-minute TV hit. Like this is where we're at with Wemby, and he's gonna have to survive that as much as he's gonna have to adjust to the NBA. And I wonder like if the Spurs feel like a good place for him to do that based on what we know about that organization.
Yeah, I really like Sohan as a potential fit next to him on the floor, because he can defend all over the floor. He's 6'9", really quick twitch athlete, can't shoot at all, but Wemby's going to shoot. He's going to space the floor for you on offense. So I think that sort of alleviates some of the spacing concerns with Sohan as your 4. I think Devin Vassell could be in for, possibly an all-star turn playing next to a star player. Keldon's pretty cool. I still have Blake Wesley stock from last year as just a really athletic rim attacking point guard. And really what the Spurs have been missing is just like sort of the straw that stirs the drink. They've had a lot of good role players, but they just haven't really had that lead initiator that, is going to begin and end all actions. And I think, Wemby's just set up perfectly for that. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating. He's going to be really fun to watch. And I think San Antonio's a great spot for him.
Can we get a ruling before we move on from him? I prefer Vic. I think saying the word Wemby is a little like infantilizing to yourself. You sound kind of ridiculous when you have to say it. I'm not saying I've never said it, but I try to remind myself Vic. I'm trying to implement Vic as the jargon, the style of just basketball. Chris goes Wemby. Where do you lean, Ricky?
I guess I've been saying Wemby, but when you were saying that, I was fully agreeing with everything you were saying, Brandon. So maybe I'll switch to Vic. I do kind of like
All
that.
right. Perfect. I got another one.
I'm gonna go to Victor. I'm just gonna go Victor full.
Okay.
I'm gonna need like because
what's his middle name?
I don't know, but I'm gonna need like because like Doctor Doom is like his real first name. The Fantastic Four villain's first name is Victor. I'm gonna need like a Victor like Doctor Doom kind of thing because like I need some art. I need some him as like a super villain art, like just imposing and scary. Like I think we're gonna get that from day one. Imagine when he gets big too, if he adds muscle. Like what is he gonna look like if he just goes to like weightlift to Texas for a weekend? You know, just goes to a college football program and like learns how to squat.
He's gonna add muscle. And then it's just like, how fluid is he still going to be athletically as he bulks up a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the big thing is just injury concerns. Just when you have anyone who's 7'5", and we just saw it with Zion, where Zion looked like such a safe bet to be a great player. But Zion had a very weird body. And Victor also has a very weird body because he's 7'5", and human beings are not supposed to be 7'5". And he had a lot of, injuries that were following him up until this year. Now, he was durable this year, but also in that French league, they're playing once a week. In the NBA, sometimes you're playing 4 times a week. So I did a story on SB Nation about his injury history like a year ago, just thinking that like, okay, this is like the one thing that could short circuit him, or, the most obvious thing that could. And he hasn't really had a serious injury, but he had, some sort of lower back injury like 2 years ago. And he had a bunch of, bumps and bruises along the way. So it'll be very interesting to see, like, if I threw it out to you guys, over under 60 games for Victor next year, are you taking the over or the under?
I would take the under.
I think I would take the under too. And part of that is just them playing it carefully. It's not even me assuming he's going to get injuries that directly become absences, but I just don't think they have any reason to force it.
Totally. I would also take the under. And you would think, they could be in line for another premium draft pick next year. Like, I think it's possible they could compete for a play-in spot if he plays enough games, if he plays around 60 games or a little bit more. But you're right, that there's no reason for them to push to compete. Like, this is just a year of, like, sort of seeing what the team looks like around him, seeing how comfortable he is in the NBA. There's really no pressure on them to win whatsoever. Oh, and by the way, they have all these Hawks draft picks from the DeJounte Murray trade. They have a 2025 Bulls pick that I think is top 8 protected from the DeRozan trade. And they're going to be set up brilliantly for the future. So another Spurs dynasty is definitely in play. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's going to be in play. And aren't we all going to be lucky to witness that once again?
Last thing on Vic. I'm just going to say Vic now. Did he? You mentioned like Zion as a weird body, like obviously very different body. Has Wemby like blown out? Has Vic blown out his shoe at all? Like have we had like a equipment mishap like we had with Zion?
He does these foot stretches that are interesting, like pregame. If you've ever seen the pictures of that.
Yeah, I have. I just wonder whatever. How do you be that big? It just seems kind of hard, honestly. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Seems unpleasant to like have to like maybe duck. There's never a door that's built for you, But I guess you're gonna make lots of money.
Tall, at least be sick at basketball,
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's Don Draper. That's what the money's for. It's like being 7'5", being incredibly wealthy pans out.
Yeah, works out. French national hero, all that stuff. All right, Ricky, if you were the head of the Charlotte Hornets, and they're reportedly having a workout on Monday with Miller and Scoot to like really with Michael Jordan there in person to kind of figure this out. Would you go Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller at 2?
Yeah, it's good to once again pretend to be Michael Jordan as I did throughout my childhood, of course. But I would go Scoot. I think it's kind of a toss-up. I would throw a few other names out there too. Amen Thompson, I think, is awesome. I have a feature story on the Thompson twins coming this week on SB Nation. Really just using this podcast to plug all my work. Sorry.
Yeah, just keep going.
Plug away. I'll buy advertising next time. I have Cam Whitmore ahead of Brandon Miller, but I have Brandon Miller 5. And he's a worthy pick at number 2 as well. Like, I think after doing this for so long, I do feel a little less conviction in my takes.
Yeah.
Like now I can kind of see both sides of it, where I don't think if Brandon Miller goes number 2, I think, in 2016, I would have gotten really worked up about that and said Charlotte is a horribly run franchise and they should fire everyone. And now I'm like, I could see it. It could totally work out. So if they do take Miller, you could talk yourself into it. He's bigger and he's the better shooter. I mean, most of the time, all things being equal, the guy who's bigger and is the better shooter is probably going to be the guy who's going to be the more effective player. But I would still take Scoot. I have some concerns on Scoot just because his numbers did not improve this year. Weird. You would think he would have gotten better his second year in the G League. His shooting fell off a little bit. And his tape just isn't that good. Like, he had a lot of times where you thought he should be able to finish plays that turned into turnovers or turned into, drives he couldn't finish. But I would still take Scoot because I think that him and LaMelo will be able to figure it out. I think LaMelo's development as a shooter, believe LaMelo was like in the top 2 or 3 of 3-point attempts per game last season, quietly because nobody was watching the Hornets. But he's become a pretty good high volume shooter. That's going to be important because the biggest hole in Scoot's skill set is just going to be his shooting, both on and off the ball. Off the ball, he's just not a very good spot up shooter at this stage. So you wonder, LaMelo, will he have to move off the ball a little bit more if they do take Scoot? But I think their games can complement each other because Scoot's so good in the mid-range. Scoot certainly provides more rim pressure than LaMelo, which is sort of a hole in LaMelo's game. They're both really good passers. And I think Scoot is just sort of built to be a downhill guard in today's NBA who, if he can continue to sort of attack the basket the way his tools say he should be able to, should be a monster drawing fouls, should be awesome in transition. And I think that he's just really good at manipulating the pick and roll. So I would take Scoot too. I'm a little less sold on Scoot after going back and watching him recently. Like before I was like, Scoot is in his own tier. And then I was going through it to do a big board, which will be published on SBNation.com this week. And I was like, I don't know. Now I could sort of, I'm still going to have him 2, but I feel like I'm not going to have him in his own tier at number 2. So long story short, I would take Scoot. I think Scoot and LaMelo, if nothing else, will make the Hornets all the young kids' favorite team. That's just such a cool team, those 2 guys. Like already children love LaMelo Ball. I've been told this. I don't really know any kids myself, so I can't.
It's probably for the best, all things considered.
Yeah, Ricky's just on TikTok being like, all right, who do the kids love? Who are the kids into these days?
Yeah, but
it's Caitlin Clark and LaMelo
and
well, they also love Ja and Caitlin Clark. I think those are like some of the holy trinity.
Sick.
Two of those 3, I would feel pretty good about if I'm a parent. One of those a little nervy at this current moment.
Can we throw names or have Ricky throw names out now? Chris,
Yeah.
are we to that part of the proceedings?
Yeah, we're there.
All right. So the guy that I'm most intrigued by as somebody who doesn't know anything about this stuff is Anthony Black, Ricky, and I think Henry Abbott. I think he said I remember reading something from him that he's writing a book about P3, and Anthony Black has been going there, and they love Anthony Black and swear that he's like the most kind of unheralded guy whose athletic traits are bound to kind of make him something better than what he might be thought of as now. But he's also pretty cool now. I mean, he's 6'7" and can kind of handle the ball and do a lot of different things on the court, which is the type of player that I tend to be drawn to. What are your expectations for him after 1 year at Arkansas, and what's kind of the best context for him to end up?
Yeah, I saw him up close in the NCAA tournament. I had a front row seat in Des Moines for Arkansas versus Illinois in the first round, and then Arkansas versus Kansas in the second round. Arkansas beat top-seeded Kansas, who was the defending national champs. Arkansas made the Sweet 16 and then got smoked. But one thing I was just drawn to about Black is the dude is just massive. Like, it's easy to see those measurements and be like, oh, he's a big guard. His legs are also like wider than my entire torso, and he's just so solidly built. So I think, to me, a big selling point is just going to be his defensive versatility. And you just look at him And it's going to be hard to move that guy off a spot, even when he's defending bigger players. So when you talk about, guards with true switchability, I think he is going to be able to defend some, fours and maybe fives in the league, small ball fives at least, which makes him really intriguing. Offensively, I have some more questions because there were so many times this year where it just felt like he couldn't really threaten the opposing defense whatsoever. Part of that was because, maybe he was miscast as a point guard. Maybe in the NBA, he'll be in more of like a connective role, similar to Josh Giddey, where he's with another ball handler and he can just sort of fill in the cracks, keep the ball moving. If he develops a better 3-point shot, you can see a pretty easy path for him to be just a good all-around player, which is the type of player teams especially need in the postseason. Someone who could defend multiple positions and has a pretty well-rounded skill set. But right now, like, really slow and unconfident shooter. And I just don't think he's like dynamic attacking the defense off the bounce. So I'm a little bit lower on him. Right now I had him 11th. I also think if Houston took him 4th, that I would be like, oh, okay, that was a pretty good pick, because he just would seem to fit well with what that team needs and is, quite frankly, a safer choice than Amen Thompson. Amen would have higher upside because he has absurd athleticism. But I would think that Black is definitely more of a high floor choice who could still have a pretty high ceiling. So I like Black, not one of my favorite prospects in this draft. Would not be surprised if he ends up being, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, a guy who should have gone in the top 5. It really is going to just depend on how his shooting confidence develops and if he can just get a little bit more explosive off the bounce. Because right now I don't really see that, but sometimes that develops in guys as they like get their bodies stronger and maybe in his case slimmer because he's pretty big. But he's an interesting prospect for sure. And you got to love a big guard. I've been suckered into some big guards covering the draft over the years.
They're tantalizing. Let me ask you about the Thompson twins, specifically in this lens. They played for Overtime Elite. That's a different. Having watched some of the games, the production's different, the talent level's different. Everything about it is very different than college and the G League and overseas stuff. So, like, is it harder to evaluate, like, as much as you can see some of the things they do and read about them and go back and watch some of their other tape and whatever, how hard is it to evaluate those guys and what they could be based on the setting they are coming from?
Yeah, I definitely think that makes it more difficult. For one, they were playing against like 16 to 18-year-olds most of the time, and they're 20. They turned 20 in January, I think. So they're like a year older than Scoot Henderson. They're like 18 months older than Cam Whitmore. They're about the same age as Brendon Miller, though. And with them, I feel like you kind of just got to go off the eye test. Like sometimes I'll see like people have like, steals per 100 possessions for the Thompson twins. It's like, who cares? Like, yeah, they're good defensive prospects for sure if you just watch them and you see the talent that they have. But I can't put any stock into an Overtime Elite statistic that isn't like free throw percentage. And by the way, they're horrible free throw shooters.
My steals per 100 at the park against the 4th graders is like really sick. I don't know if you guys have ever done any of that, but you just snatch it. It's really simple.
And they did a lot of that in Overtime Elite. The question I'm asking myself watching them, and I'm high on them, but also like I'm not going to get fired if I'm wrong on them because I have been wrong so many times covering the draft. And at the end of the day, I tend to go for upside more than the safer choice because if I'm wrong, I don't really care. Like if you really don't want to be wrong, you probably shouldn't be high on the Thompson twins because they could bust for sure. But they're such fun players to watch that I just can't help being drawn to them and root for them. I guess I'm trying to see where I want to go with this. Like, the one thing that's really interesting to them about me watching their games is that they were able to turn every game into like a transition fest to an almost hilarious degree. Like a team would miss a shot, a Thompson twin would catch the ball, do a 180 pirouette in the air, fire a 40-foot outlet pass to the brother, and the brother would pass it down court to another teammate for a bucket. And I wonder, do they have a special skill in turning games into transition fests? Or was that more a byproduct of the league they were playing in, like Chris was asking to start the question.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I do think it'd be awesome if they both played on the same team. It's kind of a bummer that they're not going to be on the same team, at least not to start their career, unless the Magic get them at 6 and 11. So I guess it's possible that they could be in that range. But while people, I think, like sort of discount that ability to turn games into transition, like transition scoring is more efficient than half court scoring always. So if you can do that, that's a very valuable skill. And it's one way to sort of mitigate being underdeveloped shooting wise. I think Amen is the worst shooter I've ever evaluated as someone covering the draft. I mean, his jump shot is horrible.
Brandon Clark, I would throw out a Brandon Clark.
It's the fact that you're like this guy could go 3 or this guy could go in the top 5, and you're like, this is the worst shooting prospect that I've ever seen covering the draft. If I'm the Houston, well, but
exactly. That's
yeah,
the difference between him and Brandon Clark. Yeah, exactly.
It is, but it's like I think this, and if I'm like some of these teams, like positionally, like what they need matters, but it's like that would scare me so much. This feels like a pick like the Wizards could make.
Yeah,
but how does Portland make that pick if they're gonna stick with they stick with Dame? It's just such a weird thing for me to think about. If I'm like, if there's parts of him that just are such a gamble, and I need something more certain, which is maybe this explains why we keep hearing rumblings of teams like wanting to trade out of the top 10 for whatever reason.
We always talk about 3-level scorers. Amen Thompson is a 1-level scorer. He has no mid-range game. He has no 3, but he is a monster at getting to the basket. He's incredibly athletic, and he's so athletic in like weird ways. Like, yes, he has a blazing first step. He could jump out of the gym, but he also just like sort of like darts from side to side of the paint to like find available breathing space for himself when he gets into trouble. It is just really crazy to watch, and he just hangs in the air longer than everyone else too. I interviewed his coach, Dave Lato, who was the head coach at DePaul, 2 different stints before he went to Overtime Elite. And he was talking about how like they almost play the game in a 4th dimension because they're just able to jump further away and hang in the air longer than anyone else. One thing I'll say, not to go into him too much because we already spent a lot of time, but I think your guys' perception of it, just reading up on it, might be that Amen is the better prospect, the better talent, whatever. And Amen, I do think, deserves to go higher. But I would say Asar is the better player right now. He's a better shooter. In the playoffs, he shot 38% from 3 and 83% at the free throw line. For the season, though, he was like, under 70% at the line and about 30% from 3. But he is a better shooter. It just looks better. Like Amen, it just doesn't look good when it leaves his hand. Asar, it's a slow release, but I think Asar is maybe going to shoot eventually. He's a really good ball handler, and he's like a way more disciplined and effective defender, both on and off the ball. So I was like sort of talking myself into an Asar is better than Amen take. And by the way, Asar was the MVP both years there. So like he has the hardware to back up the fact that he's better too. But
I'm pretty sure Kevin O'Connor has that way. Yeah.
Nice take by KOC. But I just can't get over Amen's athleticism and the fact that he's 6'7" with a 7-foot wingspan. And if he's playing on the ball, his jump shot doesn't really matter as much. Even if you go under screens on him, even if you play off him on the perimeter, if you give that guy a runway, there's sort of almost no way to stop him. And when I think of a 1-level scorer, I mean, Giannis is kind of a 1-level scorer. Granted, he's 6'11" and the strongest man in the world, and Amen is 6'7". But I do think there's ways to work around it, even in a league that shoots more threes every year. So I love the Thompson twins. Can't wait to see where they go. I think Amen would be a great fit in Houston. Or I could, if I'm Washington, definitely, like, what do they have to lose? They got nothing to lose. They drafted Johnny Davis last year, and that was supposed to be a safe pick as a Big Ten multi-year guy, and he had a horrible rookie year. So you never know, but
congratulations to the Washington Wizards for being the Washington Wizards. Well, at least Beal is now is out of their hair, and they don't have to pay that contract at the very least. So that's at least good for Ted Leonsis' pocketbook. Ricky, I want to end on this. Give me a guy outside of the top 20 that you're just convinced is going to be good.
A guy outside of the top 20 that I'm convinced
Give me a Ricky fave. So if the Cavs, let's say, like buy a late 20s pick, or the Suns do this, I can be like, Ricky said that guy's good. And if it's the guy from Belmont, I'm gonna have some PTSD to like the Dylan Windler pick. But that's a whole other story.
I like Amari Bailey from UCLA.
Okay.
Played high school ball with Bronny at Sierra Canyon. He was a consensus top 5 recruit coming into UCLA. And then I think because he was sort of like stuck between a 1 and a 2, and he's not a really great shooter, that people just sort of cooled on him. But the more I watched UCLA, just the more impressed I was with him, because he's big, he's physical, he defends, he can attack off the bounce, and his shot was actually pretty good on low percentage. Obviously, like being a low percentage shooter or low volume shooter with a good percentage is not exactly the strongest indicator for future shooting success. But I think he should have a projectable jumper. So just like physical combo guard, Amari Bailey, he's always been considered one of the best players in this class up until, he had to play a winning role for a UCLA team that wasn't built around him putting up big stats. And, they were good with him on the floor. He played a big role for the team. So I like him. I think he will be available after like pick 25 or something. And I can see him carving out a career as like, I don't know if I want to say a Derek White type, but maybe sort of in that role as like a physical combo guard who could bring a lot to the table and not take too much off.
I like that a lot. You can check all of Ricky's work out at SB Nation. He has the Thompson's twin feature coming. He has the big board coming. I have his mock-up right now from 2 weeks ago. You can go check out as well. And there's a ton of stuff we'll be doing all week. He did trade grades on Chris Paul and the Washington Wizards and Bradley Beal that you can read. And he gave the Wizards an appropriate
content
report.
machine.
Content machine. Ricky O'Donnell. Ricky, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Up next, Erik Gundersen. We're going to talk Dame. Stay tuned. All right, now we're going to the Pacific Northwest. We have a great guest with us, Erik Gundersen. You can check out the Bulls versus Blazers podcast only on Patreon, and you can check out the Blazer Banter Substack. I don't think anyone I know knows the Portland Trail Blazers better than this man. Erik, my brother, how are you?
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be on, and yeah, man, it's absolutely the most exciting time, I would say, since in the offseason at least, since they drafted Dame. I think that's the positive way of looking at it. Because I think the other way of looking at it is could be chaotic. But I think, it's an exciting time ultimately, because I think the Blazers just have more stuff to trade.
So let's just start with, I think, the big question facing Portland right now. I think where like a lot of the speculation is going. Obviously, we're in a post Bradley Beal trade world now, so I wonder if this is where a lot of the eyeballs now go to. But Damian Lillard,
absolutely.
Depending on who you ask, he's either staying, he is at draft workouts and all that stuff. You ask other people, it seems like there's a lot of I think teams are kind of hoping he becomes available in some cases. We are a couple days out from the draft. Based on what you read and you thinking about this and everything, what is your like conception of what is actually happening with Dame right now?
I mean, I think there's definitely a part of him that is like is thinking about it more, because I think he needs to see them deliver something that makes the team better. And I think it's like, before we were on air, you and I were just talking about how Damian Lillard hasn't played with an all-star teammate at the present time, like a present all-star, in 8 years. Like, that, I think, is really what he wants the most, is someone who's in their prime that is an all-star level contributor to be on the team next to him. And, and I think the conversation about the picks are very real, though. And I think the other thing that Portland, is trying to make sure is that they don't get fleeced either, because 3 is a valuable pick according to a lot of people, and I think that they don't want to be in a position where they're not getting what Dame is hoping for with 3. They've got to get that type of return with 3. if they're going to give it up, in my opinion. And I think ultimately push comes to shove. I think Joe Cronin is going to try and do that because I don't know. Let's say they change ownership in a year or two. Is Joe Cronin going to be able to stick around to see everything through?
Yeah.
With the Phil Knight speculation and everything like that, and Cronin has been here for almost, like, I think he's been here for like 16, 17 years at this point. Like, he's been with the organization a long time. And I feel like he's been waiting for this moment. And, but it is an interesting call. Like, maybe he will get to ride it out and see it through. But there's also a world in which, someone else buys the team and then they're like, oh, well, we don't see the vision, and he's gone. And I think there's so many different pressures on Cronin right now. And I think that might be the most under-discussed part of this, is that the guy trying to pull the trigger here is like under a lot of pressure from a lot of different sides. And I just think that the Miami stuff, Dame talking about other teams, I think Dame just wants to make sure that, like, they know that this has got to be, they've got to do it, that they've got to get it done, because he's been waiting for a long time to do that, and was willing to sit out the last part of this season when they had a chance to get into the play-in. And you look at what Miami did. Obviously Portland was not Miami, but like, if you're Dame and you think the way that Dame thinks, you think the way an NBA player thinks, a superstar of that level, you have to imagine that he's like, well, shit. So I think that's part of it too. So I think it's just a very fascinating time right now, but I do think that, I think ultimately both sides want to make it work here in Portland. So I think that's what it will end up being.
What I kind of love is Blazers people have this shorthand already of calling the third overall pick 3. I don't know if you've heard this, but everybody just calls it 3. It's like, well, what can 3 get? Like, it's just like it's like a movie title, or like it's like a nickname, like an operation that the FBI would do. It's just, it makes me laugh. It's like the second or third person I've heard do it that way. But do you buy the Heat thing? Do you really think that they actually did not go after Beal on purpose because they really have this highfalutin plan that they're going to go out and get Damian Lillard and that's their end game? Or is that just Pat Riley damage control a la Danny Ainge for all these years of, well, we were that close, but we chose not to go get the superstar that actually didn't ever want to come here?
Well, I mean, I think that has a lot of merit, Brendon, because of the, what we've heard a lot about the Bartlestein connection between agent and CEO of the Suns, like that being a huge thing. Like, if those two people were already kind of in lockstep and moving forward, that makes me a lot believe that the Heat really never had a chance at this situation, and that Beal actually did want to go to play with Booker and KD, because I think you bring up a great point. I also think they do want to wait for Dame. I do think they want that, but let's say the trade stuff happens and Dame does ask for trade. I don't think Miami has the best offer.
No.
This is the thing that I think gets me in all of this. And he doesn't have the no trade clause like Bradley Beal, so he can't like literally like direct himself to where he wants to go. And it's whatever the reasons are, Brendon. I know you and I talked about it. Locked On Suns will have more. There's Beal kind of had to approve that he was going there. I kind of just assumed that like Dame would get a say in where he ends up, but that isn't, as you're outlining. It's like that is not in Portland's best interest. If they decide to do this, they should take the most they should get and say, thank you, Dame, for your service. You're a franchise legend. You brought us so many memories the last however long you've been here. But
best time in 20 years of the franchise.
Yeah.
It's been 20 years since the franchise has had moments like they've had with Dame. So
yeah, and it's like now you're a Brooklyn Net. Here, thank you very much for your service. I don't think this actually does anything to further where you want to go, but congratulations, you now live in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah. I mean, especially with the thing today, no offense to, the Suns, but like, if things don't work out with Phoenix, I would much rather have Phoenix's draft picks from via Brooklyn than probably anything else on the market if I'm Portland. Because if things don't work out, let's say KD gets hurt a year again.
You know whose picks I like? Minnesota's. I'd be trying to get Minnesota's picks from Utah. Those are I gotta defend my city. You're throwing me under the bus here. We just got three of the best players in the league. I mean, come on.
I know, but I just don't,
met you, man.
I know, but I just don't think it helped. I just don't think it solved any of your guys' problems.
No, I got you. I think that's probably how they would be thinking about it. But I guess the question that comes to mind with what Chris was talking about is, to me, every NBA superstar, and I am speaking from experience here, has an implicit no trade clause, whether they actually have one in their contract or not.
Yeah.
I think that they're able to make it known in a not so subtle way whenever they become available where it is that they would like to go. And given the fact that Kevin Durant, it took him 8 months, but he ended up exactly right where he wanted to go, I think that's as good evidence as anything that if you're at a certain level, which I think Damian Lillard certainly is, you're not going to get shipped off to Toronto or Dallas or whatever if you don't want to be.
Right.
Sacramento.
I mean,
you're going to go where you want to go within reason.
I mean, I think the thing you bring up about Utah, though, is that, like, he has a history in Utah. It's not like he doesn't know it there. He went to college there. I don't think that would be, like, a thing that he would be super against. And Brooklyn, he has already said that he would be down to play with Mikal Bridges. And I think, I think I think Brooklyn has more attractive draft capital than Miami does. I just think, and so if he's down to go there and asks to leave, I think that's in Portland's best interest.
I think the other thing hanging over this is the fact that Portland does have the third pick, and that this is like a weird three. I'm looking. They
have three.
Misread some. They have three. Excuse me. Charlotte has two. Portland.
No, you
has
said
three.
it right. I'm saying you got to use the code word like the Blazers guys use. They just say three.
Oh, okay.
That was my whole.
Okay, sorry, my bad, Brendon. My brain right now.
Let's do it.
Is destroyed. I'm gonna need another LaCroix or take our producer Jake's advice and start drinking Liquid Death. But this is a weird position because how many times do we see we barely ever see teams that have established stars, name brand NBA superstars like Damian Lillard pick this high. The Warriors came the closest, and they took Wiseman, and it didn't work. Like that hasn't worked, and the two timelines thing didn't work. They're at 3. They have Mike Schmitz, who we know loves Scoot. There's a lot of other Scooty kind of things going in there. Scoot, to me, would be like a great... I'm a Scoot over Miller guy. It seems to me that like that would be like a way you could really reset some things if you wanted to, but Miller would kind of maybe like fit your need. Like, this is such a complicated pick, Eric. To me, it's like you're at 3, and if you keep Dame, what does that mean? And I don't think he's going to go the next day and be like, here's my... You didn't take someone I love at 3, you didn't trade the pick. I don't think the next day he's slapping that on Joe Cronin's desk. It doesn't feel like a Dame thing to do, but this is such an interesting position for them to be in.
It is, because you're totally right. I mean, having a player this good and being this high in the draft, it doesn't happen a lot. And I mean, to me, the team that I keep looking at is Toronto, just because it seems like they've signaled that they want to be a player development franchise. They hired this coach that is like very strong in player development. They lost some assistant coaches, which I've been reading in the Toronto media, that were really close with Siakam. And there's been a lot of rumors that Hurdle could get up to $20 million in free agency. And like with the new CBA, do you want to be like, that's the one thing about the Blazers is that like, I know it's been like their owners are probably like behind Steve Ballmer. They're still probably, they have the most money of anybody in terms of Vulcan Incorporated. And like, it's like being in the luxury tax for a year or two, even in the new CBA, like they can probably handle it more so than other teams. And even though, and they haven't done that since 2019, but I I do think that that's also, something to watch for, is that, it wouldn't be crazy to have for them, with how much money they have, to have Jeremy Grant, Pascal Siakam, and Dame on the same team. I just don't think it would be that crazy for them.
So you think Siakam is a good enough player that would sort of be that, like, cross that threshold of, like, satisfactory to Lillard?
Yeah, because he's an all-star, or at least all-star caliber player in the prime of his career. I mean, he's just turned 29.
Mm-hmm.
And he can play make. I mean, I think he's also, probably a better transition player than Dame's ever really played with, in terms of, like, being able to create his own stuff, and also in the half court as well. I mean, and defensively, rebounding. I mean, he just does a lot of things that really complement him well. And I think he and Jeremy Grant would honestly be a really good lineup together. And then, you could still, figure out with that, you'd still have the full MLE and, other exceptions that they still have a trade exception as well that they could use in the trade on draft night.
God. So if you think today, you look at this, let's say they keep the pick, do you think they would prefer Scoot to Brandon Miller?
Well, I mean, it's not really up to them, is it?
It's true.
I mean, I personally would take Scoot, just because I think Scoot is better. I think Scoot will be better. I think I like him more, and I also think I think you could easily trade him for quite a big return, like Zion. And while Siakam is something that I would like, just because I think you could probably trust that he's going to be healthy for more, and he's been there before, and he's a veteran, and, like, I think that counts when you're talking about someone playing in the playoffs. I think that matters to me, but I do think that the idea of swinging for Zion Williamson does really excite me for the Blazers, just because I do think a change of scenery could really help him.
That's the part of this that interests me the most, I think, is in the most, like, tinfoil hat, let's have the most crazy NBA offseason ever version of this. You would imagine something with Charlotte, and then, Chris and I were talking about this a little bit on our last show, like, Charlotte sort of wielding their leverage would be the worst case scenario for Portland, and it seems like they're sort of doing that, where you don't know who they're going to pick, and so a team like New Orleans that wants one of these guys actually has to go to 2, not 3, and that, hurts what the Trailblazers are able to do. The part of that I just don't see actually working or happening or making any sense is that the Hornets are going to play this the right way. Like, we're talking about a team, like, I just think the Hornets are just going to take Scoot. That's kind of where I'm at. I feel like they're trying to kind of, be cloudy and mysterious and interesting, and then it's like, okay, like, you guys kind of, everybody assumed you would take Miller because you already have LaMelo, but really you maybe like Scoot, and now word just sort of got out. Like, the sports books have reacted and all of this stuff, and so that damages, New Orleans' pursuit, because we know their guy is Scoot. So it means, well, ignore the Blazers. They actually don't really have anything to do with this anymore. But eliminating that Charlotte side of it, if Siakam's good enough, you think, to kind of satisfy Dame or present a pathway toward winning that he's okay with again, enough to get him to stay at least, is Brandon Ingram? Because I think Zion makes sense. I think anyone would be intrigued by that possibility. But Ingram seems like he's sort of right at that cutoff, where it's like, maybe, maybe not. Not really an all-star, but again, all-star caliber, you could say.
Right.
What do you think?
I mean, I think he would probably be more into it than I would be. I think he would believe in, like, wow, okay, we got another dude who could go get me a bucket and can get fouled, can make shots in close games. But I think Siakam gives you a lot more defensively. I think he just gives you a lot more complementary skills than a Brandon Ingram would, though Brandon Ingram would be an improvement that is true. I just think Portland, I do like whether, and I think, Miller gets a lot of the attention. I do think that there's a lot of also teams that really like Amen Thompson at 3. And
oh God.
And I do think that like there could be just another team that we're not thinking about that might like an Amen or something like that comes in at the 11th hour with a player and a pick or something like where they trade back and they maybe get a role player and maybe do something with that pick and something else. I just think that Joe Cronin probably knows the cap better than he definitely knows the cap better than the previous GM. And I think he knows the cap about as well, the CBA, excuse me, like about as well as anyone probably does, because he cut his teeth in the organization learning how to read the CBA and learning all the ins and outs of it. And so I think he's just a very clever guy, and I just do think that he might have something that we haven't thought of yet.
It was a good pun, Chris, where Erik said amen and then you said God. It went well together. I don't know if it was intentional, but
that was intentional, but it was also a genuine reaction to be like, I think if a team doesn't take Scooter Miller at 3, they're like, what happened? Like, what are we doing here? That's just like an open concern to me.
The Miller thing is one of the most crazy things in the draft. If he actually slips, I'm going to need people like Jonathan Gavoni or whoever to write like a government report, like a federal government 500-page explanation of what exactly has gone on with that dude this year, from the criminal stuff to soaring up draft boards to now all of a sudden falling. It makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. And I really...
Well, I mean, they said he got mono or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep.
I mean...
And that's why he wasn't good in the tournament, right? That was sort of the explanation of why he wasn't good. And he had the knee thing. Yeah.
And then he allegedly had a bad workout with Charlotte, and that's why Charlotte's having this whole Scoot and Miller MJ summit. I mean, this draft is like... last year it was like pretty like, I know it was kind of crazy that everyone was like, oh my God, Paolo going number 1. I feel like the smoke screens and like chess games and shit are just way more high level right now. And I just feel like there's so many people being used. There's so many agendas out there. I just feel like this is way more like, Game of Thrones-y type than I feel like last year's draft was, at least.
Chris, I know we want to get to more Blazers stuff. I have one option for the third pick that we haven't talked about and that we haven't talked about today.
Please, is it the Porzingis thing?
No, I don't think.
Okay, thank you. I was like, I just really don't want to talk about that because I know
it's Kyle Kuzma. No, I'm kidding. No, it's Lauri Markkanen. Because I sort of feel like Utah, they're a little bit ahead of where their pick situation should have them be, if that makes sense. Like, they're not really where Oklahoma City was 3 years ago. They're a little bit ahead of that, but they're just coming on to having all these draft picks. And so I've already been kind of looking at them as like, I really would be surprised if they took all 3 of their first round picks. And so could you do, 3 for Markkanen in 25 and then whatever Simons probably goes back, but you still get the first round pick if you're Portland because Utah doesn't need all those, and whatever it ends up looking like. I think Markkanen is better than Ingram.
I think so too. And I think he's a better fit. I think he's a way better fit because he can rebound. Like I think that to me is that's the big thing for me, is that Lauri can, this year was like a revelation for him in that respect, I feel like. But like, if that's who he is now, I would rather have him than Brendon Ingram 100%.
What do you think, Chris? You like that fit?
I like it a lot. I think Markkanen obviously really blossomed last year in a major way. I think he would be such like a guy who could fit around what Dame does in, I think, a really organic way.
LaMarcus couldn't shoot quite like Lauri can from 3, and that was a pretty sweet pairing. Now, LaMarcus was a really gifted low post and mid post scorer in a way that Lauri hasn't really shown, but like that natural 3, and I think also he's a great like dive to the rim. He's athletic. Like, I just think there is a lot there to like with that pairing. And I think it might not get the fans as excited. But I mean, I think it's worth doing, especially if you can maybe get, like, what are what do they get, the 15th pick?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like 8 or 9 and then 15 and like 26 or 28 or something like that. Yeah.
So like maybe
one in the middle of each 10, 20,
Yeah, maybe you can get workout to get 8. That would be, a dream scenario if you're going to do that trade, especially if you have to give up Simons in that kind of deal, you'd want to get something in value for him. And I think that's one of the things that I think bothers me maybe the most about the conversation about the Blazers is the way that Simons is discussed as an asset, in that he's one of the best individual 3-point shooting creators for unassisted threes in the league. And I think he has improved defensively because he's grown, he's gotten stronger, he's grown an inch, and I just think he's miscast as a 2 guard. And if you played him as your lead ball creator on your team, like I think a team like Toronto, for instance, especially with some guys like Scotty who can play make, I mean, especially a team that also like Toronto that can't shoot threes. And I think just 3-point shooting is such a premium, man. I just can't buy that, like, someone that's this good at creating deep threes and creating threes for himself is somehow just a throw in all these deals. And I just think that, like, he is part of the value that another team is getting with the number 3 pick, or 3, as we like to say, because, like, I just think, like, the notion that he's just like this garbage throw in when he makes less money than Jordan Poole, or way less money than Jordan Poole, way less money than Tyler Hero. And he provides probably better 3-point shooting than both of those guys. Like, to me, I don't understand. And defensively, the difference is marginal. And I think he probably is better because he's more athletic. Like, I just don't see how he's a negative asset in all these talks.
What it says to me is really that the Blazers aren't getting the top of the top of the top, where you have to trade Simons and the 3rd overall pick and X, Y, and Z in order to get that player. And so when you are talking about an Ingram or a Markkanen or a Siakam type, then it's like, hold on, like, Simons is not just salary in that case. And
right.
then so I think it more speaks to, like, you're not trading for Kevin Durant, you're not trading for Donovan Mitchell, you're trading for the kind of tier below that, and that's why it starts to feel a little weird, where you're like, wait a second, are we actually giving up too much if we're Portland? And I think that's where it is. I think the other funny part of all these guys that we're talking about is it just feels like Portland's destined to never have a good defensive team. Like, no matter who they get here, I'm like, and how are they getting a good defense if Nurkic ends up still being their starting center, or whatever this looks like, and a bunch of young guys in the role player spots? It's like, are they going to just be 30th in defense again, or 25th?
Well, I mean, the other thing too is that, I think Nurk can be in any of these deals because, like, let's say, for instance, let's play in the world that Toronto is willing to trade Siakam. In what world does it make sense to bring back Jakob Poeltl for $20+ million a year? When Nurkic, not as good as Poeltl, but makes a lot less money than him, like, and it's like and all your best players you're going to be your young guys on rookie contracts, so you don't have to kind of pay them quite yet. Like, that's a team where, like, let's say Yusuf Nurkic gets into the deal, where it's not like the most insane idea of having him because you don't have to pay your best players and you need a cheap center that can fill the role, that can start, 60 games. And I feel like Nurk can do that, as, frustrating as Portland fans have gotten with him.
Let's end on 2 last things here. Number 1, Shaedon Sharpe. He is kind of the other young, fascinating piece in all of this. He's obviously someone with a long runway until I think he gets to his prime or anything like that. Eric, when I say what is Shaedon Sharpe going to be in year 2, what comes to mind?
Wow. I think he's going to be the starter at the 2 guard. And I think Dame has believed in him, and I think whether whatever happens this summer or not, I think Sharpe is going to be a big part of whatever they do. And I think one of the things that I think I really came to learn about him is, like, he's a really underrated defender, and I don't think that. And I think it's, in terms of point of attack defense, he really takes pride in guarding his man. He gets chest to chest with his guy. When a guy tries to go somewhere, his chest is already there, and the Blazers really haven't had anybody that can do that in a long time, and so I think that and also he's 6'6". I think having him, he's more traditional 2-guard size, right? And I think after playing this season, and if Portland can make a move that improves the front court, which I think is really what they're looking to do right now, with if they're going to make a move, is improve the front court, because they can re-sign Jeremy Grant, and I think Sharp is going to take a lot of assignments against like really good guards defensively, for the Blazers, because I just think he has the ability, and I think he's had some mistakes with team defense, as young players do, but I just think that his natural ability to defend individually is, I think, something that I think really will get more attention in his second year.
Brendon, where are you at on Sharp?
Really excited for year 2. I mean, he's somebody that, I was excited about pre-draft. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I watched a ton of those late season Portland games when he was racking up stats. I think I maybe caught one. Maybe it was a highlight of one. Look, there's a lot going on, but I feel like
you had a good team to watch.
Well, we do a national program here, but we had some bigger fish to fry. Portland slipped through the cracks as they chose for themselves when they decided to sit their best player. But I mean, look, I think that the thing is with him is it's just going to be playing time. I mean, that's always going to be the case. That always was going to be the case because he didn't play in college. So that's really what it is. And I hope that wherever he ends up, he actually gets that. And I think he will, because it seems like Portland loves him. And if anyone's going to get him this summer, which would be a really big trade, they would probably like him a lot as well. So I just want to see him play basketball a lot more, and I think he could be really good. And that's not a hot take, but I mean, the talent's there. I mean, we all know that.
Yeah, here would be my take. I think if they were in a situation where like Dame had been moved on, like, and that was just like going to happen here, like they were in the Washington situation, you would look at Simons, you would look at their incoming draft pick, and you would look at Sharp and be like, oh, they have like a really interesting young core to rebuild with here. And that kind of doesn't, I think, get talked about just because the Dame thing takes up so much oxygen, right? Like, I think you have these guys that are ready-made to help you pivot if you decide you want to. Simons obviously already has the extension, but, like, it's not a crazy contract. It's, as you said, it's less than Hero. It is less than Poole. Like, that is not something – and the cap's going up. You're going to be okay. If you wanted to and you felt like you had it, we would be talking about those young guys in that way, I think, in a very different way than we look at like Corey Kispert or whatever, or Johnny Davis. Like, it's a different classic guy, but the Dame being there just kind of shades, I think, unfairly to them, I think, shades kind of what we can think of them in that case.
Yeah, and I think my ultimate hope is that people in the NBA maybe are not as clouded by the clout of Dame to like actually value some of these assets and make a real deal. Because like if some people can actually like make some deals in good faith, I think it would work out really well for them, and I think it would work out really well for Portland. I think maybe an underrated aspect of, again, me talking about Toronto, is if you make a deal with Portland to, gives them someone that Dame likes, that keeps Dame out of the East. Because where is Dame ultimately? I mean, you said Utah, Brendon. I mean, you talked about the Utah picks, but I mean that would be pretty crazy if they traded him in the division. I even though he does have a connection there from playing college basketball, so I just think it is a really crazy time, and I just think that ultimately, I think this is what I would say. My last takeaway about the Blazers is that ultimately, 2 years ago, after they got eliminated by the Nuggets without Jamal Murray, and they hired Billups and they fired Terry Stotts, and Lillard was like really out, like he really did not want to come back at that point, and they had nothing else really to look at either. Like they had no future besides that. And so 2 years later, because honestly, because they no longer have Neil Olshey as the general manager, and they were able to make a lot of changes in the past 2 years. Regardless of what happens, they're in a much better position than they were 2 years ago, and that's I think the most positive way to look at it if you're a Portland fan is that they're in a position to make deals, they're in a position to rebuild, they're in a position to build around Dame and give him a shot. I think that they've opened themselves a lot of doors, and I just think that ultimately, I do think the market hopefully will value some of what Portland has to offer with Simons and with the third pick.
I want to end on one last question. It's probably the rudest thing. That's why I saved it for last. And I'm going to phrase it in kind of a very blunt way. So, like, is Chauncey Billups just a good coach, or he just bad? Like, here's the thing. I have a take. I think one of the easiest things you could have done to make me feel better about any of this is just, like, say Chauncey Billups, bye, and you, like, hire, like, Sam Cassell as your head coach.
I mean, that's
like,
also super problematic, but we'll
look, is Chauncey Billups like at all like a good coach if they rebuild or if they like go all in on Dame? Like,
I mean, here's the thing. Here's what I'll say. The most forgiving thing I think I could say is that they played really hard when they were tanking. They probably won some games that they should not have won because I think Chauncey got them to play hard. And I think my most optimistic view of Chauncey is that, because my main criticism of him is he doesn't, I don't think he has a true system so much as that he changes the game plan every time based on the opponent. And I feel like that type of mindset is like really beneficial in the postseason when everything is about matchups and everything is about scheming towards the right personnel and the focus is there. But if you don't have a way that you play in the 82 game season, to me, that's a major problem. And to me, I think that's Chauncey's biggest issue, is that he has yet to establish, and I think he's tried maybe, but like whatever he's tried hasn't worked. And to create, like, to me, a style of Blazers, a style of basketball that he wants. Because he was brought in to bring up the defense. The defense is just as bad as it always was. And offensively, they're worse than they were under Terry Stotts. So, you know, it hasn't worked out. And so you want it to work out, and I think he has some strengths. I just think and I also do think that like maybe Portland staff maybe is not I think they might be too geared towards player development is what I will say in the nicest way possible.
All right, let's end there. This has been the Just Basketball Show for Monday, June 19th. Thanks again to Erik Gundersen for coming through. Check out the Bulls versus Blazers pod on Patreon. Check out his Blazers Banter Substack. You will be better off for reading it. And look, no one knows the Blazers, I think, better than this man. So follow along, tap in. Back after the NBA draft on Thursday. Let's see what kind of spice we get then. Until then, enjoy the WNBA hoops. Thanks again for tuning in. Talk to y'all soon.